Welcome to the Future Is Freelance podcast, brought to you by Zolo, the operating system of the solo economy. Every week, we'll be serving up an audio cocktail of expert tips, inspired insights, and stories from the frontiers of freelancing to help you grow your borderless business to new heights and live life on your own terms. So kick back, grab a snack, and let's get started. May you live in interesting times. Apocryphally, this was a translation of an ancient Chinese curse, and I'm sure there were times when interesting always meant trouble and danger, unlike today. And when it comes to work and how and where we do it, though, times have never been more interesting, nor more filled with exciting possibilities. For Lily Szabo, today's podcast guest, these possibilities include considering how to return to work in a flexible, location-independent way around the needs of her 7-month-old daughter. But it also means exploring the potential offered by remote work and digital nomad visas around the world, and all that these have to offer to freelancers, solopreneurs, and even location-independent employees. Lily has been documenting these issues through her blog and a recent 30-day challenge where she's created some really amazing content, and I urge you to check it out through the link in the show notes, because she's thoroughly unpacked everything you need to think about, from the regulatory frameworks to the tech ecosystems to the advocacy work and community. And thinking back to when I had a 7-month-old, I'm sure my idea of a 30-day challenge would have involved things like getting dressed or finishing a coffee. So I urge you to be even more impressed by this content when you consider its production context. Lily is also collaborating with the Plumia community project, which I really want to do a whole episode about soon, because it represents a realistic shot at creating a truly location-independent passport via a country on the internet. So watch this space. At the end of the day, it's all about community and what that means when we live and work without borders. It means interesting times, for sure. It's an incredible privilege to be documenting this transformation in the way that we live and work and make choices in the world today. And it's also a great privilege to talk about this with the people working hard to make it happen. So here's the interview with Lily. So welcome, Lily. It's great to have you with us at the Future Is Freelance.
Hi, Maya. Really great to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's a great pleasure. And I know this is going to be a really interesting conversation. What we're really interested in, though, is you and understanding your journey as a freelancer. So it would be great if you could introduce yourself. Just tell us what you do, who you do it for, but also how you got here and, you know, what your squiggly career story is to date.
Yeah. Well, right now in this moment, I'm kind of like a stay-at-home mom with a little side hustle and like nomad visas and writing lots of opinions about that. But more professionally speaking, my wheelhouse is sort of like content and communities for startups. And I've done this both in-house and as a freelancer. And I've been working remotely and like freelancing during most of that time since about like 2016. And it's just something that, I've dabbled in a lot of different little things. Mostly writing has been a core component of that, is bringing people together with words.
I love it when I get to talk to other storytellers, because we have such great conversations, and you know, we're all part of the same mission of explaining this new world of work to people who are yet to really grasp all the exciting possibilities. I love that you describe yourself as a mum first, and the other stuff's just a side hustle. And I know that, did you say your daughter's about 7 months old now?
Yeah. So I'm really in this phase where I'm, formerly such a professionally minded person, workaholic. And so this has been a real change. And I'm just getting into that moment where I'm like, okay, let's start taking baby steps back into the professional world. But having a baby, I'm really thinking so much more intentionally about the choices that I make, and definitely thinking deeply about, how to make good choices with my career and my work and the projects that I take to sort of, create that balance for myself and for family life.
It's amazing, isn't it? The choices that we have before us once you move out of that idea of going back to somebody else's office and schedule and handing off that
Yeah.
childcare, which so many people around the world still do, which I find so hard to understand. But you're approaching it so much more consciously and intentionally. And that's a really interesting example. What have you found to be the challenges? Was there anything unexpected with moving back into work with a baby in the other hand?
Unexpected, really, it's expectations. I am such like a workaholic. Let's always be at 110%, always trying to over deliver. I'm the fastest person with the most ideas. And so much of my identity is built around my productivity. So when you have a day where it's like, oh, my major accomplishment today was that like I washed my hair.
Yeah.
That's been a whole like a bit of an identity crisis. And so I joined this writing challenge course called Ship 30. And I was a little bit intimidated about being able to find time to write and publish every single day for 30 days, because that was not something that, for the last couple months, looking at my schedule, to just have uninterrupted time to like think and write. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to fit that in. And so it's been a lot about managing expectations. It's just like, okay, like I'm probably not going to be able to do the course. Like 30 days is probably too much, but let's see how much I can get it done, right? Let's be a little bit gentle with myself. Let's not be such a perfectionist, and just make sure that like done is better than perfect, and just appreciate the progression as it happens.
Yes, I think done is better than perfect is a brilliant mantra for every freelancer and every new parent.
Yeah.
But out of the 30 days, then, I'm sure, I didn't count, but I'm sure you hit most of those days publishing. And I had no idea you were doing that with such a new baby clinging to your side. So great respect for achieving that. And the theme then of your writing was about remote work and nomad visas and unlocking the world, which is such an exciting topic. So I would love to recap that, because the audience for this podcast is really people who are working for themselves or aspiring to do so. And they might be thinking about working from home. They might be thinking about co-working, and they might be thinking more globally than that and starting to wonder, where could I go? Where could I, if my work is location independent, then what does that mean for me? So I'd love to unpick some of what you discovered on this journey.
Yeah, so this course was a really great chance to sort of get out a lot of ideas that sort of have this backlog of thinking around nomad visas, and I've just kind of been like a dog with a bone. And so it was really great to be able to get some of those ideas out, because there's a lot of exciting new policy that's been coming out. There have been a lot of countries that are paying attention, and suddenly looking at digital nomads, remote workers who have the ability to work from anywhere, looking at these people in like a new light. And with the pandemic sort of like shifting gears, it's finally like, okay, it seems like we're really like unlocking something. This is like a moment that's happening. But the people who are creating policy are people who are not have not lived the lifestyle. They don't understand the pain points. Like they think about visas from an immigration perspective, and immigration in most countries are law enforcement. They're like border agents. They wear like police uniforms and
big guns
and and so the way that people frame policy tends to come from a very protectionist like aspect, right? It's not really designed with the right mindset for what we're entering, what I like to think of like a new era in like global mobility. The fact that we have this wonderful flexible thing, which is remote working, it's commonplace now, and it really unlocks us from the office, and it means that we're untethered to cities as well. We have so much more flexibility in choosing where we can work. And now that this is available to just an unprecedented number of people, that really, I think, represents a massive, like, literal movement. Like, people can move. And so that's an amazing opportunity, because the people who are able to remote work, are members of the knowledge economy. And typically at the moment, the people within this population come from like quite privileged backgrounds. This is really like the cream of the crop, like talent wise. And so any country that has aspirations, whether it's to like boost tourism, or if they have like an innovation agenda, they want to attract tech talent, like, hey, this is like it's a really nice like group of people that you should hopefully be trying to attract, so let's get programs in sync so that we can try to find win-wins.
So how are they doing then in terms of policy? Because I think it feels to me, just, even working in this space, it's really hard to keep up with the explosion of remote work visas, digital nomad visas. Are they using the right terminology? When do they introduce one and then mean the other? Are they supposed routes to residence or long-term citizenship even? Or do they really want the nomadic population to come and go? Who's winning and losing in this space? And who have you got your eye on?
Yeah, you've hit upon a couple of things, and just like fundamentally the vocabulary is a challenge, because so many of these countries are launching what they're calling digital nomad visas, but they might be more accurately called residence, like short-term residency programs for remote workers, right? Because it's like a 1-year visa that someone who has a remote job is eligible for. As soon as you commit to staying in one place for a year, you kind of like stop being a digital nomad, right? So it's kind of like that doesn't make any sense. In terms of like who's winning, we can go about that in like a couple of different ways, right? But I think if we look at programs which have now enough of a track record where we can even say that there has been some success, we've seen what's happened in Croatia. I think it was a country that during the pandemic really drew a huge population of nomads for having a fairly open border policy, and they came together quite quickly with creating a visa for digital nomads. And it's been long enough that they've been able to iterate and improve. And my understanding is there's still kinks to be worked out. And it's one of those like residency programs rather than like a really flexible like visa for coming and going.
Right.
But I think it's a success there that they had an issue. They saw a new target population. They acted on it very quickly and iterating and improving, listening to feedback from the community. For example, there was a lot of confusion around taxes. And so they've just been working to address that. And so I think that's good, because that's like engagement. Whether that's like they've been on target with what their goals were in terms of the number of people coming in. I can't speak to that, but I think like progress and learning are great things, right? Startup minded that way.
Yes, the governments are never going to tell us what they had in mind, are they? But I think even the fact that they're evolving it and listening to feedback and iterating the offer is actually very transparent for any statutory organization. So that's good to see.
Yeah, and we've had some numbers now about the Barbados Welcome Stamp program, which is open to remote workers. And that one too, they gave some hard numbers. And so I think that's really useful to keep in mind that they're like, hey, this is how much we made in terms of just the application fees. And this is how much we attribute the boost in our tourism revenue to these new remote workers who are coming. But as far as like basically by my rating for what I think like a digital nomad visa ought to be, I think what Costa Rica has recently launched is a top contender there. They've got a very reasonable income level, and it's sort of, the very minimal amount of paperwork that's required. And it's like people who are remote employees as well as freelancers and entrepreneurs can be eligible, which is an issue for some of them, right? They're like, oh, we need you to prove that you have work. And it's a little bit harder for a freelancer to like prove, like not everyone has a long-term contract, right? So yeah, I think that's one to keep an eye on, and very interested to see how things shape up in Indonesia too, as it seems they're sort of
it feels like there's lots of different sort of movements in Bali and around Indonesia as sort of for the soul of the digital nomad movement. And is it going to be a 5-year visa, or is it going to be something more fluid? Or but I suppose that's where a lot of people consider digital nomadism began. And so it's not surprising. Well, it's a frontier.
I'm a Chiang Mai girl. so I will like argue for my hometown. I think we
Okay,
have a little
that's
bit
it.
of that like Bali Chiang Mai rivalry, but Bali is an amazing place, and in a
Yeah.
way, that's sort of where I started a phase of like my like remote freelancer career. I went to Bali for I did a boot camp. I did like a 14-day front end web development boot camp. I wanted to like boost my marketing skills with some like tech chops, and so
Hmm.
I did a little retreat boot camp there that was super fun before I sort of came back to Chiang Mai, and I was like, okay, now it's time to figure out how to freelance. That was like
Yeah.
2017.
It feel anything BC just feels like a different era, doesn't it? When we're trying to remember these things that were only 4 or 5 years ago, but before
Yeah.
everything shifted, and that's why it's such an exciting time to be a storyteller
Hmm.
in this space, to be talking to people like you and all the other guests that we have on the show who are working creatively in
Yeah.
this area. It's amazing. So, I mean, yeah, the remote work visa scene, then obviously it's really diverse. As you said, there were lots of different
Hmm.
requirements. I love the sound of the Costa Rica one with a low income requirement. Has that proved a barrier
Hmm.
then for lots of areas? I know the Barbados one's
Hmm.
they said it was very high, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so being from Thailand, and this is where sort of my interest in nomad visas like started.
Mm,
One of my frustrations in trying to work with the government here has been like the expectations for some of the schemes sort of around the space that have been launched. They have like such high income requirements that are just really not proportional to the cost of living here. That it's
mm,
just like, what's going on? This is like not. It's just not in alignment. It doesn't feel like true to the reality and like what the brand ought to be.
yeah.
And so that's something I'm particularly sensitive to. Um, and I think there's just like this snobbishness too, that like someone's like value is defined by like what they're making like right
Mm,
now. Because I mean, if you think about how valuable I am right now, my work and the writing that I'm producing is not something that I'm like presently being paid for. It's an investment into a
yeah.
direction that I want my career to go in. But like right now, my income statements for the past couple months have been zero, right?
Yes. Well, you're very
But that
valuable to
doesn't
one little
speak.
girl. You're
Yes, yes.
infinitely valuable, but yeah.
But by the dollar amount, like I wouldn't
Yeah.
qualify on my own, right? Sans my
Right.
husband's income for any of these visas. But I know about the work that I've been able to do in the past and about the value I bring to
Mm,
organizations, and so it's just it's a bit of a silly metric. So
it
that's why,
is.
like,
Yeah.
okay, don't use someone's like income as a way to judge whether they're worthy or not. It should just be like fairly basic to be like, hey, can they support themselves living in this
Yes.
country? It's just simple as
It
that,
makes
right?
total sense. And the whole reason a lot of people do travel to another area is to leverage that geo arbitrage. And, you know
Absolutely.
that well, I'm making enough to live perfectly well in wherever it is. And before, people would have just gone on a tourist visa. But now, if they're investigating the remote work visa, they might realize that they can't prove anything like the income.
Hmm.
And let's face it, as freelancers, it's dribs and drabs. There's like feast and famine. There's this and there's
Exactly.
that. And it's exactly the same here in Europe. Even, in Spain, where I'm resident, on paper, I just look really erratic and unreliable. I've been able to buy a house, but
Yeah.
I couldn't get credit to put solar panels on it because I don't have
Mm.
an income history that looks sort of nice and smooth over 3 years, like the kind of thing that comes with an employment contract, which is still very much what the
Yeah.
statutory regulations are oriented towards. So, I mean, I suppose it makes sense from the point of view of never being a burden on the host country
Hmm.
and never seeking
Sure.
to take work away from people who are natives of that country. But do
Hmm.
you think that the high income requirement, I'm wondering, does it create more of a barrier between the migrant workers and the local population? Do you think socially it would be better if that were more relaxed?
It kind of depends on the goal, right? Because when I think it's like a of whether it's like policy or marketing campaign, right? You have to like design with the like end objective, right? Like what are you trying to work at? Make sure that
Mm,
everything that's built in is moving towards a certain outcome. And so you mentioned not competing with the local market, right? Well,
mm,
that kind of depends on your goals, right? Because if you have a visa for digital nomads and remote workers because you want to attract tech talent, right? Because you have aspirations of becoming the next Silicon Valley, then you might actually want to allow people to work in your country because you want that knowledge transfer to be happening. You want someone who has like lived and worked in Silicon Valley and has like an amazing network of like entrepreneurs and investors. Yeah. You want them to set up shop and like sort of be able to easily and quickly like work with people locally, right? And sort of pass along these opportunities. And with regard to that income, if you're setting a really high income, like, and you're trying to attract these, like, okay, this like person who works in big tech from California and earns like, $500,000 a year. Okay, sure, those people exist, but like, can your local companies ever afford them? Yes. Like, how difficult will they be able to integrate into your economy as part of your labor force if that's the sort of value that they're commanding versus, let's say, like a developer from Pakistan who is extremely competent and who can command a high salary for their geography, right? Someone there who's like coming in and taking advantage of like one of these visas. Like what's the salaries that are offered locally might actually be more within a range that they would be very happy to accept. So, and they have the skills, they have the tech chops, right? So to me that dollar it just comes across as like snobbery without actually being, because like an accurate reflection of someone's value and the contribution they can bring.
Yes.
But actually, the note is, what's the point of the policy? Because if you have a policy that you want to attract a certain type of like profile of person and you want to tax them, right, based on their income tax, like if that is like specifically the thing you're trying to do, then to me, I guess it makes sense that you're like, okay, only people who are making this amount of money. Because like they're geoarbitraging based on like the tax rate that they would be paying.
Yes, it's exactly as you said. It depends on where this decision is coming from. And if it's coming at the fiscal policy level that we want to bring this income in and we're not so bothered about social integration or skills transfer or integrated living. Because I think, what you're going to see if you bring in very high income people is you're not going to see that real co-living and social integration that you would hope for. And those are the way that the soft skills, the contacts, the shared projects are going to incubate and evolve. If people are living basically in expat ghettos because they have all those services catered to them and catered to their income bracket and their language and all those expectations, then, you're not going to get that long-term community feeling, which to me feels like the heart of this movement, and the fact that there is this persistent sense of community and people moving around and taking their skills and contacts and bringing all of that to wherever they go. So maybe it's not surprising then that we've seen some backlash, I think, in South America and in other parts of the world against the idea of digital nomads coming in, maybe pushing up housing prices and things. How do you think that's going to play out?
Yeah, because I think, relating it to income as well, right? If you're trying to bring in only wealthy people, then there's kind of obviously going to be a gentrifying effect. On Twitter right now, Peter Levels, founder of Nomad List, has sort of been like bashing Bali because like the housing market there is like so insane. So there's an interesting sort of like little Twitter war going on there that I'm like half paying attention to. And I guess there was even like a protest in like Mexico or something, which I didn't have any sources on the ground at the time to confirm, or if this is just a bunch of PR hype. But, apparently people were protesting about, remote workers driving up housing prices. But that also just sounded like actually like it's not even the remote workers. It's just the whole Airbnb effect we sort of like seen in general.
Yes, it's the same in Europe, the coastal cities. It's really hard to get a long or medium term rental because everybody wants weekly Airbnb rates for their place. And it's not down to remote workers. It's down to that greed and what people can access. So I think often maybe it's an easy target to blame the immigrants or remote workers.
Oh, of course, the outsiders, right?
Yeah, always be misunderstood. But I suppose
No.
gentrification, though, has always been with us. It's always been a factor. And
Mhm.
maybe the one thing that this movement can do to help reverse that is, you touched on it earlier, is to make it a move away from cities and those
Oh
traditional
yeah.
hubs. Yeah, I think that's probably an exciting area that digital nomads are actively helping to mitigate gentrification by saying, okay, we don't need to be in San Francisco or London or Barcelona. We can go to a nice little island somewhere.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's the founder of Zoho, the CRM, that
Mm-hmm.
sort of famously is like, he's been working out of like a little village in India for years, and sort of
Brilliant.
like kind of low key with that, even before we were really hyping remote work. So, yeah, like what other, it's like, because you have all these people who like left their villages, left their hometowns, right, and they
Mm.
went to cities because that's where the jobs were. But all of a sudden we have this new flexibility, and it's like you can choose based on where you actually want to live, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't have to go. The opportunities are literally anywhere you have Wi-Fi. Um, yeah.
It's brilliant. And we had Gonzalo Hall on a few weeks ago talking about the work
Hmm.
he's doing to develop communities in Madeira and Cape Verde and, little islands, bringing people back. And even in Spain, there are projects to try and bring people back to the pueblos, which are basically
Yeah.
dying because there's nobody there under 60. And, there are,
Hmm.
as soon as people basically want to raise a family or so, and they head off to where the jobs are. But we really need these infrastructure projects to put the broadband in, put the
Yeah.
schools and everything else to attract people back to live there. But I feel there's so much scope for digital nomads to lead the way in this,
Hmm.
and really change things on the ground for these people.
Or yeah, because I do think that one like is sort of enlarging the scope, right? Because you do need some people to commit,
Mm,
like because as someone who sort of identifies with the digital nomad like movement writ large, I do really believe in like freedom and opportunity and flexibility and having choice. But I'm also someone who really believes that you really have to commit to really get like the most like return. That's
mm,
kind of like a life philosophy, where like whether that's like relationship or family or the place you choose to live, because even nomads often they return to the same
yeah.
places because it's your experience is more rich when it has depth, right? And
Yes.
I think that's much of life. And so yes, like digital nomads can be sort of leading these revitalization projects, but you know some people within that group hopefully sort of move down the immigration funnel, let's say, and like
Yeah.
can
But
like
you
stick
made a lovely
around and like
graphic,
really
didn't you?
invest.
You see, moving from sort of like a tourist to a digital nomad to a
Hmm.
long-term remote worker, and eventually maybe to a
Yeah.
change of citizenship, and
Yeah.
all that implies, which is sort of the deepest commitment, I guess, you can make.
Hmm.
Which is, I found that really interesting because I was trying to work out where I sat on that
Yeah.
funnel, especially with what has happened with my passport, which used to give me access to the whole EU, and doesn't
Oh
any longer.
yeah.
And that was the first time I'd ever really consciously thought about passport power, because I was part of that incredibly privileged group that had never had to question it
Yeah.
before. Having been born with this document that meant I could travel anywhere in the EU, pretty much anywhere in the world, in fact,
Hmm.
and all that implies for global mobility. Now that we're out the other side of lockdown and people can go everywhere, it's really incredibly stupid that one nation has cut itself off from that, but never mind, we won't go into that.
Yeah.
But it is still an issue, obviously, the whole passport power,
Hmm.
and the privilege to be able to say, well, I really fancy going and working there. It's
Yeah.
not just about income, it's about where you're allowed to go. So I'd love to touch a little bit on the work that you're doing at Plumia and the community there
Yeah.
to try and open this up and give us more powerful passports that are designed for this new life of global
Hmm.
mobility.
Yeah, so Plumia are great. They're a project that were initiated by a SafetyWing, the insurance
Mm-hmm.
company, and I was just involved with them just as like a bit of a maniacal volunteer who's just like jumping into everything.
Brilliant.
But more recently, I've been doing some like freelance work with them to sort of like help bring together the community, which has been really fun. And just that Plumia is an initiative to create a country on the internet. And there's a lot of different projects like that, but they all like have a slightly different end goal. If you work in startups and SaaS, then you kind of might recognize, I like to say that they're trying to, SaaSify the nation state. If you think about like a country as a service provider, and you think about how they do all those different things, the social safety net, healthcare, education, security, whatever, right? And you think like, oh, how can you turn that into like a SaaS company? That's maybe a bit of the approach that I sort of see them going for. And that's why like SafetyWing as an insurance company are doing the social safety net. But really the big moonshot project for Plumia is to create like a passport, a travel card, passport, Nomad pass, whatever you call it. But something that has the real world, usability of a passport, but for people who are citizens of this digital nation, so that, regardless of the country that you were born from, if you become a citizen of Plumia, because you're part of this global population that is able to work remotely and you're deemed valuable because of that, then you will be able to use this passport to travel hopefully anywhere in the world someday.
It's incredibly exciting.
Yeah.
I feel it's a lovely community as well, and we can put the links into the show notes here, because I think there will be listeners who've maybe not come across it, with whom this is going to really resonate, this idea of a digital community, which you can access in different physical locations, which are gradually starting to connect with each other and synergize, and people moving from one to the other, with this idea that eventually we'll be able to treat that as a digital nation. It's got a lot in common with Estonia and the e-residency movement as well. Which I suppose is why I was drawn to it in the first place. That this idea of the nation as a service, and
absolutely.
What do we need? We need that social safety net, which we need medical care when we need it, and things like that. We need fiscal safety net as well, like being able to save for retirement and things like that. We need to be able to come and go. We need to be able to put our communication services. There's an awful lot to think about, isn't there?
Yeah. And sort of, as freelancers too, right? We don't in the US, right? Your insurance usually comes through your employer. So if you're a contractor or a freelancer, then it's like harder or more expensive for you to access that. That's kind of just like fundamentally, right? And then what else do you lack for security as a freelancer, which like so many digital nomads are? If you aren't tied to a single company and you aren't tied to a single country that's going to like back you, it really does put you in a perilous position. And so that's where I think like, okay, like actually like this is something that really becomes empowering. It allows people to do this thing that would otherwise be reserved only for the privileged who are able to take the risks, right?
Yes. And it is a risk, and it's the removal of the things that we have always taken for granted. And I know it holds a lot of people back from going freelance in the first place, even in the US or even in other European countries where the benefits are good. And people have grown up with that safety net. Their parents had it, that everybody in their community does. So why would you step away from all the benefits of an employment contract? Even in this era now where that employment might be location independent, a lot of people are saying, well, I can take my work and go and get one of these remote work visas and go to Barbados for a year or whatever, and take all those benefits with me. It's a huge step to truly unlock. Would you say it's the next evolution of location independence then, to really replace all that?
Maybe it's just more of the reality is there, the lifestyle is there. It's just setting up the infrastructure around it so that it's supported rather than like cobbled together and hacked together and existing in a gray area.
So it's a bit theoretical at the moment then, I guess, but it's obviously Plumia are actively working on it. We know that other people are. And we know that there are different movements around the world. But I suppose bringing it back to the shorter term horizon as we get towards the end of this conversation, I'm really interested in knowing what's on your radar now for, say, the next 6 to 12 months in terms of remote work visas. We might not have our Plumia passport in our hand yet, but where can we go? Where might we be able to go? In the immediate future, what's the current exciting scene of remote work and digital nomad visas?
There are a number of options that are really out there, but like honestly, even without these from like visas, they're like, the most digital nomads travel on a tourist visa, right? I think, for some people, they just feel like, oh, I don't want to do that like risky thing, but it's so normal.
Yes.
For myself, with a 7-month-old, not a lot of travel is on the radar.
Fair enough.
We do move around because, we're based in Chiang Mai, and the air quality here becomes a problem like a part of the year. So what we've been doing is we've often gone down to Koh Phangan in the south of Thailand to sort of escape that. So we are semi-nomadic for parts of the year. I don't know. We've talked about maybe going a little further, about heading off to Bali perhaps this year, because my husband hasn't been before. But I've never been to Vietnam, so I'd still be sort of keen to check things out elsewhere in Southeast Asia while we do that. But work. I'm not really sure. I'm like in such a moment of transition, like having a baby is like kind of the biggest thing in my life. So everything needs to be planned around that. So where I'm going to go, what I'm going to do, I'm very much in this space where I'm trying to figure out, I've been doing little freelance projects like here and there. And I've been considering, okay, do I want to keep doing like freelance projects? Like, do I want to turn sort of this hobby of championing nomad visas into some sort of career? Or do I just want the security of a full-time job? So I don't know. I'm sort of in a space of exploration and kind of exploring that in public, I guess. And which is why you've seen me so active on LinkedIn and creating content, because I'm sort of journaling aloud to try to sort of get access to some coaching from like really smart people to sort of see what sticks. It's
fantastic though that it is part of this whole global community aspect that you can crowdsource this insight in a way that we've never been able to do before. And in many ways, you've never had so many choices to make because previously, before COVID and everything, it would be much more a case of, well, where could I live under what terms? And it's what's the route to a residency or a visa in this place? And it was much more fragmented. Now it feels like there's a new remote work visa every month or so coming up. Maybe Spain. Hello, Spain will finally get around to enacting the legislation they've been talking about all year. Instead of just speculating about it, because people will be heading off to other parts of Europe before long because they simply got their act together more quickly. But as somebody shopping that lifestyle, I can understand that it's very overwhelming and confusing for lots. And I hope that people will find it useful having listened to this. If people want to access the work that you've been creating around that, where's the best place to find all of particularly your recent blogging challenge and social media? Where can people connect with you?
So LinkedIn is the best place to connect with me. It's where I am publishing content the most regularly and really trying to engage people. I have a Medium blog, but it comes and goes. I should probably invest in it a little bit more, but say hi
in
to
all
me
that
on
free
LinkedIn.
time that you have.
And all that free time that I have. Exactly.
Okay. So LinkedIn is the place to check out Lily. Well, we'll put the links in anyway. And I'm sure if you've got questions, just bear in mind she has a 7-month-old and making all these
that's what async is great for.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, the conversation will unfold in its own sweet time, but it will definitely lead to great insight. And maybe somebody listening to this will be starting to think about, well, if she can do it, we really need to check out all the possibilities that are out there. So thank you so much, Lily, especially around the needs of your daughter. I really appreciate you coming on to talk to our listeners today.
Yeah, I appreciate you being flexible too. It's like that's such a big thing to be able to make these things work. It's other people just being understanding and accommodating. So kudos. Thank you, Maya.
No problem at all. The future is freelance and the future is flexible. It's got to be. Thanks so much, Lily. You've been listening to the Future Is Freelance podcast, brought to you by Zolo.io, who offer compliance, taxation, invoicing, and admin solutions for fiercely independent solopreneurs across the globe. From simply getting paid to launching a full EU-based limited company, Zolo has you covered, thanks to Estonian e-residency and a superb suite of streamlined business software. If you enjoyed the show, please like, rate, and comment, and subscribe to our feed wherever you get your podcasts.